Hello there, I'm Sarah, your natural endometriosis expert. Welcome to my podcast. This is the place to be for information, advice and tips on managing your endometriosis naturally. I've been managing my own endo now successfully for about 20 years, and I've been running my own therapy business since 2008, helping others to do the same. If you're curious to cut through all the noise and rubbish that's out there and learn the key to managing endometriosis with minimal reliance on drugs and surgery, then this is the only podcast you'll need. Let's get started. Hello there, welcome to this episode of the only endometriosis podcast you need. In this episode, we're going to be looking at change. We're going to be looking at how change can be scary, how it can be debilitating, why that is, and what on earth it has to do with endometriosis. So if you've listened to the last podcast episode, you will know that I took a step back from the podcast for a lot of reasons, some being fear-based, which is something that I talk about quite a lot with my one-to-one clients. I was very, very guilty when I started this journey of focusing on supporting women and teaching them how to manage their own period symptoms. I was very evangelical, let's say militant, maybe even, about the prospect of women managing their own endometriosis. I got carried away in the early days. And that was purely because I was passionate about it, but also I was kind of, well, I can do it, so anybody can do it, that kind of mindset. And I completely forgot just how difficult it was for me, not only in the early days, but also when I was struggling with life in general, to remember the skills that I'd learned. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with my journey, I was diagnosed with endometriosis over 20 years ago now. When I had my initial journey with the diagnosis, when I was going through the treatment, when I was going through the Zoladex injection, I had a very supportive workplace. Life wasn't particularly stressful. And the support I got at work made that journey, made that time a heck of a lot easier. Flash forward 10 years, my work situation was a lot worse. My stresses were a lot worse. I'd moved to a brand new town, a completely different county. I didn't really know anybody there. My stress levels were huge, and I know that stress is a massive trigger for my endometriosis, and that was the worst flare-up of endometriosis I'd had in the 10 years. In fact, I've only had 2 flare-ups in the last 20 years, and that is still the worst I've had. And even though I'd been managing my endo successfully for the 10 years previously, even though I'd done all the courses, I'd learnt all the techniques, I knew what to do, I couldn't bring myself to do them. And that is largely because of the changes that it would have involved. So I was working long hours. I was stupidly obsessed with work. I had a very high-profile project that I was working on. I threw everything into it. And in order for me to do the things that I know I needed to do to get myself well, i.e., to have kept myself well in the first place and then get back to being well, I would have had to change things. So I would have had to step back from work. I would have had to maybe stop renovating my house. All the things that I was doing might not have been able to be such high priority if I was going to look after myself. I would have had to prioritise my energy and my money a little bit more on me. And I simply didn't want to, because if I didn't focus at work, if I didn't work all the hours I had on this job, if I wasn't putting all my money into the house, then what on earth would happen? I could lose my job, my house would never get finished. All of these things would fall by the wayside. I was better off where I was. Okay, I was in pain. Okay, I was getting these symptoms again, but actually the fear of the other stuff that might well have fallen by the wayside had I looked after myself was enough to keep me where I was. Similarly, when I was on my first treatment, massive treatment for endo, and the diagnostic journey, the fear then that I would have to have surgery was actually more than the fear of trying to manage it myself. But that's only because I had people around me who were supportive in my journey, but also who could introduce me to natural ways to look at symptoms, to alternative medicine, and help me try things. The thought of actually living with endometriosis, turning my back on Western medicine at the time, was terrifying. Our brains are hardwired to resist change. Our brains are hardwired to, I suppose, resist the uncertainty that comes with change. And even if we know that the changes are for the best, the changes will make us happier, the changes will or could be such a relief, bring so much more positivity into our lives, our brains are hardwired still to resist that, because brains love certainty. With certainty, we can manage everything. So no matter how much pain I was in, no matter what my symptoms were with endometriosis in the early days when I was going through the diagnosis process, no matter how crappy I was feeling, I was alive. I was still able to work. I was still able to drive. I was having to take some time off. I was having to sort of sleep weird ways, sometimes sleep sitting up. I was having to mitigate my symptoms. I was having to change little things in my life to make things more comfortable, but my life was still manageable. The thought of turning around to the doctors and saying, do you know what, I'm going to manage this by myself, was even more uncertain at the time because I didn't know if I'd be able to do it. But the reassurance that I got from people around me made it a heck of a lot less scary. Had I not had that support at the time, I doubt I would have had the courage to step up and say, do you know what, I am going to look for another path first. And I forgot, in my arrogance, in my excitement, in my passion, when I started doing this health coaching, for want of a better term, that's not what I call myself, but when I started on this path of teaching and supporting women to manage their own symptoms, I forgot the reality of actually what that change feels like. The treatment pathway, in inverted commas, for endometriosis and for periods in general, for women's health, for menopause in general, that we have in this Western system of ours is woeful, but it's there and it's a safety net. And the thought of turning your back on that, the thought of saying, do you know what, I've got this, thanks, I'm good, when you don't know if you have, is terrifying. And I must apologise to everybody. I remember having those early days when I used to do free webinars. I still do occasionally, so keep an eye out for them if I am doing them. In fact, I might start them again next year. Yes, watch this space. But I used to run a lot of free webinars in lockdown, and I used to talk about the 3-stage process that I had for endometriosis, and I was starting to be a lot more visible with it. At that point, I'd only really been helping local women who'd come to see me, and during lockdown, I was like, well, hang on, there's an opportunity here for me to widen this scope. I was advertising in America, I was advertising all over the UK, Australia, India. I was getting people from India, and I was having arguments with people on these webinars. Women were sort of saying, look, you're being irresponsible, you're selling snake oil to us, you're telling us we can do these things, but we can't. And I was like, oh, you can, of course you can, look, I've done it, I can do it, everybody can do it. I'd forgotten just how debilitating that fear of starting out is. If you think about moving house, so for those of you who listened to the last podcast, for those of you who know me, you will know that my life has undergone some incredibly significant changes this last 12 to 18 months. I won't harp on about the fact I met my soulmate. I'll try for this to be the last time I mention it. I can't guarantee it. But yes, I met and married my soulmate within 140 days last year. We eloped to Scotland. We went for a long honeymoon in America. We had our first Christmas together. We had our first New Year together. Moved house, which was a prolonged 6 months of agony. All these changes were fantastic. I never once doubted that what I was doing, I knew with absolute certainty that everything I was doing was for my best interest, for my greater good, for my own happiness. But the changes that came with that were immense. So I sold my house. In selling my house, I also made my business homeless. So I was treating women from a treatment room in my back garden. So selling my house meant I was also selling my treatment space. I didn't have the certainty of a new house to move to, so I couldn't commit to a new treatment space anywhere. So my treatments finished, albeit temporarily. They are back up and running, if you listen to the last podcast. But I just couldn't commit. So there was a whole load of uncertainty. And I had to keep telling myself why, or not why I was doing it, because it was obvious why I was doing it, I guess, but reminding myself that the benefits that these changes will bring, focusing on the bigger picture. So you know yourself, I'm sure, if you go for a new job, if you get the job, if you start looking at houses and then you get the house, that excitement quite often is tinged with like a nervous excitement at the beginning, but then actually the closer the house move becomes, the closer the new job start date becomes, the more and more the shift changes. It shifts towards anxiety, imposter syndrome. Can I actually do this job? What if I can't do this job? What if I don't like the people? What if they don't like me? All of these catastrophizing thoughts kind of come in. That's our mind trying to keep us safe. Okay, this job might be this job that you're in might not be as well paid. It might not be as nice a company as the one that you're going to. The job might be boring. You might be unhappy, but you're getting a regular wage. You know you can do it. Keep yourself safe. Don't put yourself out there. Just stay where you are. Exactly the same reason that a lot of people stay in abusive relationships. Exactly the same reason why people stay in situations that doesn't make them 100% happy. You can't be 100% happy all the time, obviously, but exactly why people stay in situations that make them less than happy, because our brain tells us the uncertainty of whatever is next could be even worse. Even if we don't believe it is, our brain is hardwired to keep us safe, to keep us alive, to tell us that actually we are okay where we are, even if what is out there is better. So apologies to everybody who I was really flippant with in the early days. And that was kind of where I was going with this podcast as well. The podcast, when I sat and revisited it over the last 6 months or so, when I was thinking, hang on, I've talked about endometriosis to death, I have nothing left to say, I suddenly realised that actually what I haven't done is gone back and explored the big challenges, the big wins, the big excitements of my own journey. What actually stopped me from taking positive action either in the early days or when I had my flare-ups? What actually prevented me from doing all the things that I knew I needed to do to keep myself well? Obviously, in the early days, that was knowledge. I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't have the level of certainty that I could manage my endometriosis symptoms. But you'd have thought if anybody in the world wouldn't have had a flare-up, it would have been me. I knew 10 years into my endo journey that stress was a trigger. I knew how to mitigate that. And yet I was so focused on the wrong things. I was so, in inverted commas, safe in my routines and safe in my actions and what I was doing day to day, that I didn't want the uncertainty of trying to find a new acupuncturist, of walking to a park for a run that I didn't know the area for. All of these things were just too much at the time. So if you are thinking about taking control of your endometriosis, if you're going through menopause and you're thinking about making these changes, but you don't know where to start, and you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, there are a few things that I can suggest to help you. Even if that's not the change that you're kind of a little bit scared of, if you are contemplating getting a new job, if you're contemplating moving house, if you're contemplating starting a new relationship or ending a current relationship, but you're just not making progress, then I have a few tips for you. So the first thing to do is to constantly tell your brain that you're safe and constantly remind your brain that change is good. And if you have in your mind the picture of where you want to be, whatever goal you're striving for, be that symptom-free endometriosis, be that a fantastic new house with a garden, be that, I don't know, a beach holiday even, focus on that change that you want to happen and tell yourself that it will be for the good. Try and silence that little mind monkey that's jumping around trying to keep you safe in the present, safe in the here and now, and remind that actually you can do all the things to make yourself safe. This is going to be a good change for you. Then focus on inspired actions, I like to call them. So once you have that goal in your mind, plan for it. And again, you can go as deep into this as you want. So if we were doing this at work, if you were starting a project, then you would have your project plan, you'd have your outputs, you'd have your outcomes, you'd have your time scales, you'd have your SMART objectives, and you'd have all that down. Do exactly the same if you want to go that far in your personal life. So if you want to start managing your own endo, if you want to have a symptom-free menopause, if you'd like to have a baby, if you'd like to recover after baby loss, whatever it is that you're struggling with, that you're grappling with at the minute, picture the end goal and write down your key steps to getting there. And if you're struggling, or when you're struggling, I should say, because it is inevitable that you will have the wobbles. It is inevitable that anxiety will take hold, that mind monkey will jump up and down and you'll start listening to it again. Bring yourself back to your goals. Bring yourself back to those actions. Have a Pinterest board. Cut out, if you're still old school and like the sort of the, what do you call it? I don't know, where you cut out pictures and stick them on places. I can't remember what it's called. But if you're old school and you like that, or if you have a Pinterest board, bring yourself back to those pictures. Put yourself in that situation and feel the feelings that you get. So feel the excitement, feel the happiness. If it is a beach holiday, the change that you want to make, you just want to take a month off work and go and sit on a beach. Don't listen to the mind monkeys that says, but what if? Picture yourself on that beach. Look at pictures of the beach and picture yourself there. Close your eyes, open your mind, and in your mind's eye, picture yourself on that beach. Write down actions that you'll take to get there and constantly remind yourself that this is a change for the better. Your new house is a change for the better. Your new relationship is a change for the better. Be really gentle with yourself as well. So if you're instigating change, so if you've got to the point where change is happening, so again, if you're thinking about managing your own health better, taking steps to do it. So if you are stepping back from work, if you're trying to quieten the noise and expectation of work, if you are in what's the word I was going to say there? Oh, this is a very forgetful podcast, isn't it, today? But if you are in the hustle and bustle of a house chain, if you're feeling powerless, then be really, really gentle with yourself. Always control what you can. So be really, really gentle with yourself. If you're doing a transition, if you're in the middle of a transition, then be patient and be really, really gentle and kind with yourself. Things aren't always going to go as expected. Exactly the same as me with my endometriosis journey. It wasn't that one day I decided that I was going to manage my endometriosis and by the next time I had a period, everything was fine. I had to learn new techniques, some of the things I didn't like. Acupuncture, for example, it took me probably about 15 years to find an acupuncturist that didn't hurt, that I actually enjoyed going to. And I stuck with it, not continuously. There was years and years where I didn't give it a try. But every now and again I was drawn to try it. So I tried it, I didn't like it, left it for another couple of years. Be gentle. If things don't go to plan, if you do have a bad month, if you do have, I don't know, if something else goes wrong, if you're trying to do a diet and you end up eating, I don't know, a bag of Quality Streets. Really random example, don't know where that came from. Nothing to do with the bag of Quality Streets that I'm currently sat looking at. Just be gentle with yourself. We are only human and our imperfections are what makes us perfect. So just be really, really gentle. Be very, very kind with yourself. Work out some mantras that you can use for when you're feeling like you can't cope, when you're feeling as if the change is overwhelming. Focus on the positives, focus on the outcomes, and come up with mantras to keep yourself in that positive frame of mind. And the last thing is to try and break it down so that it is less overwhelming. So it's probably not the last thing. That's probably the first thing when you're talking about your goals and setting your targets and things. But one really, really nice thing as well is to think, well, if everything else is overwhelming, if everything's too much, then just set aside 10 minutes every night for journaling so that you can break down that bigger thing every day. You can just focus on one little thing. So you could even write down things you're grateful for, everything that made you smile that day. Use the generic journaling stuff, but always end it with an affirmation about what it is that you're trying to achieve. So you can either write that, so if it is your endometriosis, always end with an affirmation, something like, I have everything I need to control my endometriosis. I am able to control my endometriosis. I will control my endometriosis. Whatever that goal that you have, I will find my dream house. I will get on my dream holiday. Whatever that goal is, remind yourself that you will achieve it, and feel the happy feelings that you get. Feel the dopamine rush that you get when you say it will happen. And be gentle with yourself. Like I say, change is unsettling. Even good change can be really, really unsettling. Just be gentle with yourself and be ready for the unexpected. Resilience is the key. The greater your resilience, then the easier it is to navigate any kind of change. And we can only be resilient when we have capacity. So the little things you do to ensure your well-being now will have massive, massive rewards when it comes to the actual change, when it comes to managing that change, if you will. So I hope that helps. Next time, we're going to be looking at sort of routines and rituals that can help you, not just necessarily about change, but about general looking after yourself, general well-being, building up that resilience. It helps so much with other stuff. Pain management is incredibly sensitive, and it's massively impacted by our resilience. The bigger your resilience is, then the easier it is to manage pain and all sorts of other symptoms as well. So we're going to be looking at that next time. Like I say, the remaining podcasts for this year are all around sort of more generic well-being. We've got seasonal self-care, how to look excuse me, how to look at your symptoms during colder weather, during seasonal change, things you can do to not resist the seasonal changes. And then we've got some great stuff coming up towards the end of the year, all around making 2025 your best health and well-being year yet. So please do stick with me. I really, really am so grateful to everybody, like I say, who's commented on my podcast, who's emailed me to share their thoughts. If there is anything you'd like to see in the coming weeks, please do email me. I have a vague schedule, nothing set in stone, and let's change it up now that we know how to deal with the change. Until next time, stay well. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I really hope that you found this podcast helpful. If you did, please hit follow so you can listen to more, and please also share it with anyone else who you think will benefit. And don't forget, if you're looking for women's health treatments, workshops or support within your workplace, you can find all of my services, including our monthly virtual clinic, over at www.halcyonwomenshealth.com. I'll see you next time.